Blacksmith of the Apocalypse. By Arcuser. Chapter 911 Broken Shield. After assuring the man and his daughter that he sent someone to look for their auntie and sending the Parrot of Doom for Mike's reinforcements, Seth was free to return to the workshop the following day. Although there were no pressing matters, it didn't mean that he intended to slack when he had materials waiting for him. The next project was the broken shield they had brought back from Y City. The shield was made from the scale of a legendary beast that resembled a pangolin. It was a single scale already the size of a kite shield. The craftsman who fashioned the shield originally had not done much more than smooth the surface, engrave a few enchantments, and attach a handle. While the broken hammer had nothing but its material going for it, since it was enchanted by a magician, Seth was able to extract the enchantments from the shield. They were master-level enchantments to increase the durability of the shield, as well as the strength and endurance of the user. It was a unified circuit, but after learning the generic automaton core circuit of Hephaestus through hard work, Seth was able to extract the 3 individual enchantments from the unified circuit. Apart from the material itself, this was the biggest gain. From the beginning, Seth was able to unlock blueprints for items by raising his blacksmith level, but not enchantments. His blacksmith's eyes of the maestro had allowed him to learn enchantments by disassembling or just appraising items later on. Most enchantments he currently knew were the ones he had collected during travel abroad in a different world. These were all up to the journeyman tier, the level he was at when he had to return to Earth. He had also bought a bunch of items from the auction house to try and augment his knowledge. He had a good set of craftsman tier enchants, but items with master tier enchantment were all at least relics, as such they were rare and expensive. Lately, the blacksmith had done his best to learn the demonic etching to make up for his lack in high-grade enchantments, and he had used many of his Olympian enchantments for the legendary items he created so far. As such, he never really cared about the lack of master-tier circuits. However, now he saw the error of his ways. Although the enchantments obviously cost a lot more mana to be maintained, they also had a far greater effect. Currently, his normal enchantments like strength and attributes added 70 points to the respective attribute, or 100 if he used combined ones. This was with the improvements through his various skills and skill levels. This combined circuit was able to raise strength and endurance by 80 and improve the item's durability by 1000. Once extracted, he had the single circuits that could raise strength and endurance by 100, as well as raise the item's durability by 1500 as base values. As such, these new enchantments alone already made Seth very happy. As for the scale itself, the material's effects were called ground defense and a skill called earth escape, but there was a catch. Mountain Borer's scale, broken. The scale of a legendary mountain borer, a beast resembling a giant pangolin that is not only said to dig massive tunnels and burrows even through the hardest of stones, but could also become one with the earth, like an elemental. Ground defense, unavailable. The wearer's physical defense is tripled as long as they are in contact with the ground. The skill worked similarly to a magician's blink or Seth's Scorpio escape. Active skill, earth escape, cost 500 mana, cooldown 30 seconds, unavailable. The user can become one with the earth element and travel through the soil to escape. Requirements: in contact with an earth elemental surface. Range: 5 meters in any direction except up. Both the skill and the effect were currently unavailable, because the shield, or rather the scale, was broken. This also meant Seth couldn't just break the scale in lots of parts to make several items with this effect. The blacksmith actually found it intriguing that now, as he had more examples of legendary materials, they all showed their unique properties based on the legend they stemmed from. At least this was Seth's assumption. For example, when he worked with the dragon scales, it did not matter whether he changed their shape or split up their material, the damage negation was an inherent quality. On the other hand, the effects of materials like adamantium or the scale had external traits based on their legend that worked as restrictions or exceptions. For adamantium, it was the makeup of its alloy that allowed him to fake it for a lower price. For this scale, it was a restriction that stipulated that it had to be intact to show its potential. Seth was sure there would only be more legendary materials with these kinds of external traits and not less. So far, he was lucky with his materials given by gods or refined through special circumstances. Whereas one could call those, too, an external trait. He mused about the topic for a while, before he got back to the item in question. Ultimately, he had to repair the scale and recycle it into a usable shield. The blacksmith also already had someone in mind for the new shield once it was finished. Although Tekker was the prime target for anything and everything defense, the shield was going to be mint, this time. Since the revived adventurer and vassal of Seth had joined Field Team 4, Jonah's team, as the main tank, he also needed at least one legendary item. Also, the pangolin scale was very light, so it didn't fit Tekker's specs. The man needed a massive, heavy shield to optimize the effects of his class and skills. Beemant on the other hand was not fully specialized in defense and would do better with a light shield that could keep him agile in battle. With practiced movements, Seth started swinging the hammer and singing his forge song. The choice of forging a ballad was obvious, since it was a shield. Seth chose Old Faithful, the ballad of damage reflection for a damage reflection of 40%. The first step was getting the scale back to shape. The kite shield shaped scale had been broken into two parts. Starting from an impact crater in the middle that had an uncanny resemblance of a fist imprint, the crack split the shield from its lower tip to the upper right edge. Seth used Karen's Obel and Energy Manipulation 3 to infuse his mana into the legendary material and slowly made it malleable on the edges of the crack. In this place, he needed to forge weld the two parts back together. This took the longest and the most energy since there was a lot of material to move. This gave him enough time to redevelop his respect for the vampires since one of them had smashed this shield with their bare fists. Vlad's and Genevieve's people were a legendary race of vampires like the rumored progenitor that would always be mentioned in fantasy stories. However, not every individual was a legend from birth, like dragons. But like Puffles, they would grow to become legends simply with age and talent. For example, Vlad and Genevieve were not the oldest, but still the strongest vampires of their people. The vampires didn't like talking about it, but it seemed that the few vampires that were legends had fallen during their fight with the Beyond, showing how they had just faced the tip of what the Ethnarchs were capable of. Once the scale was back in one piece, Seth also took the time to smooth out the smaller cracks, dents, scrapes, and the old enchantments left from its time as a shield. After he was done with it, he was left with a clean, fresh scale he could turn into a shield. Chapter 912 Where's the Demon? Starting with a good lunch break and a fresh pangolin scale, the blacksmith returned to his workshop and was ready to plan out what to do with the shield. After all, he came from a thorough vacation and spent the last days with other projects like Samuel, Love, and the Capeche. When did he have the time to do anything like this? He sat down at the workbench, staring at the scale and working inside the user terminal of the blueprint skill to create a blueprint fitting for the shield. The new circuits he had just harvested were strong contenders to be added to the shield. The scale didn't have great durability to begin with, which explained the initial enchantment. Once the defense, even when tripled, was overcome, it would not take too much to break it again. Seth would have liked to change something like adding a demonic poem to it to make it more original, but he actually had to agree with the original maker of the former shield. Endurance, strength, and improved durability were the best combination for this scale, which was why he decided to add the former enchantment again. The real question was what to do with the soul. Seth found that he didn't really have a fitting one for a shield or one that could fit the Earth's elemental power within the scale. This left him only one choice: he would have to pay a visit to Tanomol before he could decide how to plan out the soul. Seth had not paid a visit to the soul trader for a while, almost 3 weeks now. He gave a notice to Mina, Finn, and the others before he left for Delta. The city had changed quite a bit ever since he came here. One would have expected things to become better now that a new representative of Krna was here, but things had already gone too far to be changed in a short time. While Delta looked as rundown as before, the demon district looked worse. With many of the moderate factions of demons leaving for Minas Mar, it left only those of a more extreme nature and those who couldn't leave. This became quite visible with the state of the current demon district. There were signs of fights everywhere and the previously full streets and bazaars had become barren. There were still some stalls, but it was far from as packed as it was back then. In comparison, the Shadow District was even fuller than before. The rotten part of society had grown, while the fresh part had been cut away. Was Chard still in power? Who knew? The blacksmith avoided unwanted attention by equipping his helm of Hades. Hidden from everyone's eyes, Seth arrived at the usual warehouse. But something was different from usual. There was no guard standing in front of it. A little befuddled, he tried to open the door. It swung open with ease, but behind the door was only an empty warehouse. Shocked, Seth realized that Tanomol had moved. He had moved without telling him where to. Do you know where Tanomol has gone? Scared, the dark-skinned demon jumped when the voice rang out in the empty room. His wide-open eyes stared at Seth when he took off his helmet. Hi, Chard, it's been a while since we met. The blacksmith greeted the demon. Chard, Imber's uncle. Since the soul trader wasn't where he was supposed to be, Seth decided to look for the man who had sent him there the first time. T-Tower Master. You surprised me, he said a little embarrassed, trying to recover his composure. Almost as surprised as I was, when Tunnamole wasn't there when I went looking for him. Seth spoke with a little smirk, as he waited for the demon to recover. Chard was not the lord of the underworld he used to be. Even criminals were hit by the recession, so to speak. He found Chard in a small room above his tavern, that was closed this evening. I'm sorry, Tower Master. I don't have the connections I used to have. I don't know what happened to Tunnamole, he made excuses. But can you find him? I don't think someone who was as connected as you were, would suddenly lose everything. Maybe if I had some time and the right budget. I could ask some people. As Seth thought, Chard was not completely out of the game. It was just a question of monetary support. Let's shorten this. How much do you want? Seth simply asked. He wasn't here to have small talk with the man. He really had wanted to take his time to look at merchandise in return, instead, he had to look for Chard. If you can give me 15 gold I can call some people immediately. 15 gold was not a small sum, but Seth agreed to pay him if he found the location or a useful clue to his whereabouts. Why don't you wait downstairs in the pub while I call some people, he asked after Seth agreed to the price. With a shrug of his shoulders, Seth left the room to wait for Chard. He didn't have to sit around for long. Although the information broker seemed a little down on his luck, it only took him 20 minutes before he came sauntering down the stairs with a confident smirk. It seemed like he found him. Tunnamole relocated his shop because some nasty people started looking for him. I couldn't find the new location of his shop, but I have a contact you can approach, the demon directly got to business and informed Seth, showing him a picture in a crystal ball. But you should be aware, that I'm not the only one who got this info. The blacksmith recognized the person in the picture. It was the business lady, Sandra something, that had accompanied him on the little quest the goat had given him in the beginning of their business relationship. If it was her, Seth didn't doubt that she would know where to find the demon now. Here's 15 gold, tell me where I can find her. The deal went without a problem and Seth departed from the empty pub. His destination was an apartment building that was still relatively normal without many modifications, despite being part of the demon district. This part of the demons occupied was inhabited by mostly humanoid demons, so even normal humans didn't stand out. As someone who grew up in the city and had the map skill, Seth easily found the address Chard had given him. With his invisibility activated he had no problem getting into the building, but facing the locked door, he could only knock on the simple door and wait. When nothing happened after a while, he used life detection, the skill of his left teratopaz earring. He was able to make out several life signs in the apartment and couldn't help feel suspicious. He knocked again, more energetic. One of the life signs started moving to the door. This time he was able to hear heavy steps too, as the person stepped close to the door and looked through the peephole. Seeing nobody, the person turned back around, prompting Seth to knock again. This time the door was thrown open by a massive guy with his skin covered in scales. Angrily his reptilian pupils scanned the hallway as he hollered, "Who's there? Come out!" In the meantime the invisible bard slipped in, only to find a rather unsavory scene. The woman he came looking for was tied to a chair, covered in blood. Her hair was disheveled, her glasses were broken on the ground. There were signs that she had been roughed up and they had even started torturing her. They were the other two scaly demons standing to the left and right of her. They were currently occupied looking toward the door, where their muscular companion was cursing as he couldn't find the guy who kept pranking them. Chard did say that he wasn't the only one with the information, but it seemed like these guys had been at it for a few days already. Using Thaya's discerning eyes he found that, although she looked barely alive, Sandra Irving's life was not in acute danger with her 700/1000 health. This didn't mean she was in great condition, but at least she was not close to death. "Come back already and close the door," the muscular but not tall reptilian on the left called back their buff henchman. "Don't you think we should just bring her along? We have been at this for 3 days and she didn't talk. Maybe the customer can use mind magic to get the info they need," the slim and haggard-looking third reptilian suggested. Seth hesitated only for a moment. Maybe, if he let them go on, he could follow them and find whoever was behind this? But on the other hand, a loud crack answered the meager lizard, as the short muscular one's head made a 180 degrees turn and its neck was broken. It was still staring at its companion, slumping to the ground, when its view suddenly shifted and the last thing it saw in this life, was its own tail. When the big guy followed his mate's call and stopped at the sight of both of them dead, he was suddenly folded by a punch to the gut followed by one last view at the ceiling of the room. Who is there? Sandra had been watching these things happen in quick succession. Only when silence ensued afterward, she managed to press out some words through her sore throat and swollen lips. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared in the room from thin air. Chapter 913 Could you untie me? It's been a while since we met last. You look horrible, the bard greeted her, the helm of Hades he just took off in his hands. The helm vanished and Leroy returned to his head, as he equipped it through the status screen. Seth? What are you doing here? She asked muffled, as it was hard to speak with her swollen lips. Obviously, I'm saving you, aren't I? Although I originally just came here to ask where Tinamole ran off to. You do know where he is, right? The bard asked friendly. See, could you untie me first? She asked pitifully. I don't know, can I? Seth asked with a big smile. He wasn't acting like this because of cruelty, but because he had taken a look at her status. Sandra Irving was not just someone working for the goat to collect souls in Earth's ruins. It seemed that she was also one of the very rare mage that specialized in spatial magic. While Allison was a wizard who was able to use space magic thanks to a scroll, Sandra was a genuine space mage, like Dylan Mo. She was currently bound with a rope that sealed her magic, otherwise, she would have been able to teleport away at any point in time. Now, Seth was not a very trusting person and he didn't quite know Sandra's personality or how she would act in this situation. He preferred to get the info he needed before she was able to simply run away and leave him in the dust. Facing Seth's smile, the businesswoman quickly caught on to his meaning. She had not noticed Seth appraising her, but it seemed that he knew her skills, explaining his current actions. Tinamole is currently hiding in a safe house in the human district, close to the Parliament building. I will bring you there. I have no reason to run, he also wanted to meet you, she mumbled. Can you release me now, she pleaded. Seth pursed his lips as he gauged her. Finally, the blacksmith decided to give her a credit of trust and undid the ropes she was bound with. The ropes in question wandered in his inventory since they were actually quite rare and expensive. As a service, he also used healing magic, helping her to recover from her wounds. Thank you, Tower Master, she said, having recovered some of her composure. No need to thank me, let's go look for the goat, I need a good soul or two. I can bring us there right away, she said and opened a portal with a wave of her hand. Past the portal, Seth was able to see a dark vault, filled with the hundreds of soul vessels that used to hang in Tinamole's soul emporium. With an inviting gesture, Sandra asked him to enter first. After a moment of hesitation, Seth stepped in. The place was a lot less organized than the original store. It was apparent that this was more of a makeshift storage than a well-put-together store. Sandra? Is that you? Are you okay? The goat came running, worry on its hairy face. The demon came to a grinding halt when he saw who stood in front of the portal. Seth? Seth? You, this is your fault, the goat screeched incensed, but he didn't dare attack the blacksmith. He just kept huffing and puffing, not even really cursing at him. From the demon's tirade, Seth was able to assemble the story of what had happened. The bard had created the devil's wheel fiddle with the demonic soul Tinamole had sold him. Back then, the goat did talk about how he could get in trouble for trading the souls of demons. Nothing would have happened, if not for Seth. By using the soul on his musical instrument and broadcasting his music across the demon network, there were not few people who were able to pick up that there was a demonic soul used to make those tunes. Now that in itself was nothing bad, but among them were also those people who were not supposed to know what had happened to this soul. These people managed to follow the trail back to Earth and finally to Tinamole, one of the three only soul traders on Earth. So, technically, it was Seth's fault the demon had to suddenly relocate since Seth's actions circumvented all the measures he did to erase his trails. Okay, I think I got the gist of it, you can stop whining now. Are you still in business or not? What? I think it is time to stop now, Sir Mole. Sandra, who came during his speech, spoke up. I have spent the last 3 days being tortured and it was thanks to Mr. Smith saving me, that I can be here now. Oh, no. Are you okay now? The demon quickly waddled over to her, taking her hands. Who even are those guys that are after you? Seth finally asked. They were people with quite expensive items and henchmen with a lot of experience in torture. Depending on who they were, maybe he could simply help the goat and get a few discounts? Tunomol squinted his eyes at him. The previous master of the soul's owner, WebNovel, a rather violent demon king with a lord backing him. He already has a sizable following here in Delta, Tunomol explained. Is he one of those rascals from the more extreme faction? Seth asked, thinking of the reason why half of the Bard College and many demons had moved to Minas March. There has been an increase of volatile elements among the demon community. Was WebNovel one of them? You could say he is one of the most extreme I know, the demon said, finally calmed down. Then why are you still in Delta? Couldn't you have gone somewhere else? Now that he knows my name, it will be hard to hide. His methods are not really subtle. I doubt any of my business partners would be willing to shield me. How about you stay at Minas Mar? I can free some space in our embassy for you. The blacksmith threw out the bait, knowing that the demon had nowhere else to go. You want to offer me protection? The demon asked warily. Or you directly work for me? I could make you something like the director of soul acquisitions. Sound nice, right? All you want are my souls and connections. You devil, the demon cried out angrily. I won't deny that I need your skills, but it's not all I want. I'm just being honest with you since we are good acquaintances. When I offer to help you, I also want to keep using your services. I just thought, if you joined us straight away, I would have a better excuse to go against WebNovel. You what? You want to go against a demon king? Did you lose your mind? He's what the system would call a legend, the goat exclaimed exasperated. Even better, then he won't dare to come here for the time being. We can just pick off his followers as they come, Seth said matter-of-factly. If he could get the soul trader and a source of readily delivered demon souls, he was not against it. Although the system didn't block legendary individuals from entering Earth anymore, since the Guardian Tree reached the legendary stage, everyone else didn't know that. Unless a legendary beast happened to stumble in and was found, or another creature reached the legendary realm and was found, nobody would find out either. That's what you think. Do you think nobody noticed your summoning and who answered it? I can assure you, the sum of the demons know that Earth is no longer protected. Tunomol revealed a mistake Seth had not noticed before. The new gods that the scene had turned into were probably on the same stage as deities or legends. He had sacrificed 7 of them and summoned a creature even stronger than them. How could he have forgotten the kind of impact it had? Of course, the empires of the Pathworks were probably none the wiser, but what about the demons? When a giant whale suddenly started moving, wouldn't it make waves? When the goat mentioned it, Seth had no doubts that there would have been demons that noticed this. The fact he was able to summon such a creature was easy proof that the system no longer blocked legends from entering. Now that he thought about it, was it true that the Pathwork empires didn't know? Even if they didn't know about the scene and the demon he summoned, there was the field boss Lezekai, who was definitely close to or above the legendary grade. Maybe the only reason anybody was yet to send a legend over, was the wariness of others doing the same? Who said there were not already legends roaming around? But Seth also had a legend, that was constantly growing, literally. Legend also didn't necessarily mean great combat power, so I will still offer you to come to Minas Mar, though we can try to keep it secret for now. Fine. Chapter 914 Big, Epic, and Up. Great, since you agreed to join, show me your souls, Big, Epic, and Up please. The blacksmith could finally get to business. This all started with him needing a soul for the shield, after all. The demon could only sigh. The tower master acted as if he didn't understand the situation, but knowing that he acted like this despite knowing was even more frustrating. Any preferences? Tunomol asked. He had lost the energy to get upset anymore. A soul related to the earth element would be fitting, the bard mused. Although the mountain borer had no magical affinity with the earth, it was undeniably an earth elemental beast. Tunomol made a complicated expression, hearing his choice. The goat's face was hard to read since he was a goat and such. I don't have any big earth element souls anymore, he said succinctly. It seemed like there was more to it, but the demon did not explain. On the other hand, Sandra suddenly proved to be surprisingly helpful. Before fleeing, Mr. Mole tried to bribe one of the leaders under WebNovel to hide his whereabouts using all the good earth elemental souls in the shop. It's safe to say, it didn't work. Sandra jammed the metaphorical dagger into the goat's back, exposing what he felt as a shameful failure. Ugh, Sandra, whose side are you on? The goat cried tragically, saddened by her betrayal. Ours, of course. Tower Master, the demon in question, as you may have guessed, a demon of the earth element. Her name is Azo. Since you are going to pick a fight with WebNovel anyway, why not harvest her soul? Sandra deftly, crudely tried to set the bard up to directly take down one of their enemies. As crude as this attempt to kill with a borrowed dagger was, her words were not wrong. Since he was going to pick a fight anyway, he could also start the harvest while his opponent still didn't know that they were enemies. Tell me more about this, Azo. But before I go, let me choose a bunch of soul, as a commemoration of our new business relationship. For free, of course. The demon goat grimaced but nodded unwillingly. Following Sandra's descriptions, it was not hard for the blacksmith to find the base of Azo. According to the lady, there were 4 followers of WebNovel in Delta, that took the role of leaders of the faction. Each had their own base, across Delta's demon district. Against Seth's initial guess, they were not called the 4 heavenly demons, or kings, they didn't have a collective name at all. They were just people in the middle management, not worth having any great titles. Understandably, Seth was a little bummed that his targets were just some cogs in WebNovel's war machinery. Big cogs sure, but still, nothing world-shaking. The Demon King would probably not even care about losing these guys. The building Seth reached after following Sandra's instructions was a former hotel that had now quite obviously been remodeled for the oldest profession in the world. Lavish decorations had been added to the modern facade, making the building look exotic and old. Striking lighting and arcane advertisements that could not be misunderstood lured with promises of unforgettable nights with sexy and skilled demons that could cover any fetish. Blinded by the outside, the bard expected to go up against a succubus and once again get something like the soul of a seductress. However, just because someone put up their base in a brothel, didn't mean they also worked there themselves. Azo was neither a slimy pimp nor a buff bouncer or a petite seductress, she resembled what internet culture used to call a muscle mommy. She was tall and covered in firm muscles, only overshadowed by her considerable bust. Her skin covered in short, brown fur told stories of great battles as it was marked by many scars where no fur grew. Although she was a demon, she resembled the Tijake, with facial features like those of a cat or a lion, as well as a golden mane of hair and the fitting ears. What made her out as a lion, were the 5 pronounced black horns that emerged from her golden sea of hair. Seth had entered invisible and found the demoness in the VIP lounge of the club that occupied the 3 bottom floors. Here she was, playing around with demons and demonesses alike, drinking alcohol and enjoying carnal pleasures. She was a whopping leave 150 but absolutely defenseless. For a moment, he considered waiting and letting her finish her business. It seemed rude to interrupt her orgy for his profane business of killing her. A last nice memory before death, couldn't he grant that? Nat, the blacksmith didn't have a fetish to watch others at work. With a practiced snap, pop, and crackle the body lost her life, soul, and body, as everything wandered into Seth's inventory, leaving her partner's confusion that quickly grew to hysteria. Panicking, these weaker demons started crying for help and running around like headless chickens. Now, the bard could have reaped the whole field, but it would have lowered the impact of what he just did. There was a difference between killing and making the body of a high-ranking subordinate disappear with nobody knowing how and getting rid of all the witnesses. Also, Seth didn't want to touch them. Azo was one thing, but he would not voluntarily touch these people covered in stuff. Anyway, he had various reasons to let the witnesses live, and quickly booked it, leaving the brothel behind. Although Seth already had the soul he wanted and more, he still had 3 more houses to visit. He felt like the Krampus, going around, catching bad children. Former of Epsilon. Brag Minima, a buff demon with ruby-red skin, was sitting on his throne of skulls. He was the blood brother of WebNovel and the first of his 4 dukes, the demons directly below the king. He had been sent to this new world, following the summon of local demon worshippers. Unfortunately, they had suffered some setbacks facing the resistance of Epsilon. The survivors went as far as to bomb their own city, leaving the demon only with a massive field of ruins and a pitiful number of followers in this world. So, you are telling me, that we lost Azo, Mazo, Ipso, and Faxo? He asked, undeniably pissed. With so few worshippers remaining, the conjuration of their troops to Earth was arduous and slow. They had sent people to the other districts to look for willing natives who would sell their souls and services for power. This was an unfortunate necessity for their troops. Since they did not descend with their true bodies, they would be under severe restrictions in a foreign world, unless they were properly summoned to this plane by a native of this realm. The scene had been quite open to deal with them, but they had vanished a few weeks ago in an incident that involved a true lord. Leaving them with nothing in return of their cooperation, not even space to complain in that matter. As for Delta, there already was a big population of demons, originally of a moderate faction. There were many forces vying to take the power in this place. Now they had lost the 4 executives they had sent there to grow their forces in a mind-numbingly weird manner. Yes, we got reports that each of them was killed in front of a crowd of witnesses, without anybody being able to see the assailant or react, or their bodies had been taken. Even their soul has vanished without a trace. Even their souls, this was the most depressing part. A demon dying on a foreign plane meant nothing. Usually, their souls would return to their true bodies, and they would be able to descend again when summoned with the corresponding sacrifices. But there was nothing they could do if someone stole their souls. Do we have any clue about who could have done this? Not yet, I'm sorry. Without proper leadership, the investigations are slow, and it doesn't seem like there are any rumors yet about what faction would have a reason for such drastic measures. Then make sure to tell them to summon a new leader and fix this problem. Yes, Your Highness. Chapter 915 Lioness Azo. It was a fresh day when Seth returned to the workshop. Yesterday was very eventful, and his little outing to purchase a soul had taken much longer than he had expected. After hunting demons over the day, he had helped Tunomol move to the embassy of Minas Mar, using Legion. After explaining everything to Mary, it was already evening. Instead of working deep into the night, Seth had returned to the sweet embrace of his girlfriends and enjoyed the evening with them. Since Mike and Lydia were on their own little missions, the field teams were mostly on break, meaning Mina and Finn were not stuck in dungeons all the time, making going home early very attractive. Still, he had work to do, and that was why he returned today. The shield for Beemont was still waiting to be finished. As Sandra has suggested, the soul of Azo seemed to more or less fit the bill. Soul of Lioness Azo, massive, epic, ego, crafting material. The soul of a high-ranking Leonide demon called Azo. A powerful demoness known for her advanced skills in combat mixed with basic earth elemental sorcery. Affinity, combat skills, earth-type skills. Active skill, Lion's Roar. Trait, Predator's Rule. The bill fit pretty well. Even the trait was quite good, as it was similar to Seth's Dragon Might. Trait, Predator's Rule. The aura of coercion of a king of the jungle. Surrounding hostiles are slowed and weakened depending on the difference in willpower. This was always a welcome skill for a tanker. The only problem was that the blacksmith was simply too good. Spirit capture had preserved the ego of the demoness, and she obviously would not be very happy about becoming an equipment. Of course, there was always the possibility of turning her into a golem since he had her body. But did he want a demon golem? He couldn't deny that doing that and giving her the Kapesh was tempting, just for the coolness factor. A scarred, muscular lioness warrior, wielding 2 dark sabers? He would have bet money that it would get a blessing from the Heliopolian gods. The problem was her ego and her origins. If Seth were to turn her into a golem, he would try to preserve some of her personality. The blacksmith had made great advancements in manipulating the makeup of the soul and was almost confident in manipulating an ego by erasing specific parts. But demons were not to be trusted. Demons were experts of the soul. Even if he erased her ego completely, who was to say she did not have a recovery partition he did not see? Or some external means to re-imprint her personality and memories onto the soul. Turning her into an autonomous golem was too risky. Using her on equipment held much lower risks. Even if she managed to recover her original ego through some means, she would still be just an item, without any power to act on its own. At best, she would annoy the user by talking to them. Before Seth started futzing around with the very content of her being, he gave Azo the chance to talk, as he did with the soul of the seductress. Azo, can you hear me? Who are you and what are you doing with my soul? A deep, smooth female voice asked, upset. I'm the blacksmith who will give you a new body. What? What nonsense are you spouting? Release me and I can return to my original body. Ah, you see, that won't happen. Some glutton consumed all the earth-type souls in town and left nothing for the hard-working laborer like me. I took your soul as a substitute and reparations. The soul fell silent for a moment. You are with Tunomol, aren't you? You are the guy who bought Vanessa's soul and used it in your music. She concluded after the moment of silence. Shit, that also means you are the guy who summoned Musa Praktish, she suddenly exclaimed in a small panic. You are pretty well informed. Seth commented, feeling a little awkward about the change in her voice. I have no skill with singing or music. My soul is absolutely useless to a bard like you. She tried to argue. You are right, that's why I will turn you into a shield. The reason I'm talking to you is to give you a chance to preserve your ego. A complete ego is always a pro for an item, as long as the ego is cooperative. If you aren't cooperative, I will have to start messing around with your soul until you are. Seth left no doubt about the consequences of saying no. What is the deal? There has to be a deal, right? She asked desperately. It seemed like she had already let go of the notion of resistance. Now she was trying to negotiate the best outcome for herself. It's simple, really. The demonic bard offered her the same deal as he did to the mask. She would not have to accept anyone she didn't like as her carrier, unless Seth said so. In addition, she was given the special right to try and escape the bounds of the shield, if she was to ever come into the possession of someone not part of Mina's march. Seth simply added this because he was 90% sure that a powerful demon like her had a workaround, even if her soul was properly sealed or, in this case, reborn as an item. He didn't feel like trying to convince her to stay an item for eternity, so he threw that clause in to sweeten the deal. She agreed, albeit reluctantly. They signed the soul contract that would bind them to their promise, and Seth was free to work her soul however he wanted. Do you have any favorite song or poem? He asked as he was thinking of how to enchant her soul. I will survive? Beta, THRES. Mike was not overly enthusiastic over the sudden side mission. Lydia on the other hand was quite happy about the chance to keep traveling with her boyfriend for a while longer. Although it was hard to comprehend why Seth would send them reinforcements, especially some unhinged parrot-like series. Of course, they would never dare to call the mechanical lightning eagle a parrot in its face. Just one of the signs of its power. To Lydia's even greater joy, they would have some downtime alone since Seth asked them to stay at THRES until the golem reached the city. You can stay with the priestesses, we have prepared a building for guests to stay and there are enough free rooms, the guide, one of the guards that had received them at the entrance, told them. Compared to the ruins just outside the barrier, they had already gotten quite far in the restoration of THRES. But when complimented on their progress by one of the priestesses, the guard grimaced a little. On the surface, we are doing well, but the underground is the real problem, he said, conflicted about whether he should tell them. In the end, he did. On the surface they already blocked portals, were managing dungeons, and had restored quite a lot of buildings. Their problems began when they tried to reconquer the subterranean floors of the district, where most of the maintenance and infrastructural facilities were found. Water treatment plants, power plants, waste disposal, and food production had all been moved below the city, to save living space in the tightly populated districts. It was a great solution at the time they were built, when not every dark nook could turn into a dungeon or harbor beasts. We have already walled off the entrances to THRES underground from other cities and maintenance tunnels, but these weird monsters keep appearing, some of them can hardly be killed. I'm sure you saw a few of them on the way, right? Not even Adam knows anything about them, the guard lamented. They had silently been following the man as he talked and quickly arrived at a square, surrounded by a group of high-risers. The guard pointed to one of them, which seemed like a hotel or an expensive apartment tower. You can stay in this place. Our arcanists and the crew from Little Sigma already managed to repair and upgrade roughly 80% of it, he commented on the side. With upgrades he was talking about arcane security systems like a barrier that protected the building. You are the warriors from Minas Mar, right? He held back Mike and Lydia, as the priestesses started entering the building, following a guard acting like a porter. The couple nodded in unison. Would you please follow me for a moment? Governor Adam wanted to have a meeting with you. Chapter 916 Adam. The office the two were led to was clean, but Spartan. A desk, chairs, and a bunch of filing cabinets. It didn't seem like a place that was often used. The whole room was more like it was created just to have an office without the office saying anything about the man sitting at the table. According to the little golden name sign on the desk, this was Governor Adam. The man sitting behind the desk was a lot more expressive than the room he was seated in. A hunk of a man, packed with muscles his clothes could barely contain. The artificial druid looked absolutely displaced in this room, like a grown man playing tea party at a 3-year-old's toy table. Contrary to his animalistic aura, he had a warm smile when he looked up and spotted the two. The item he had focused on previously was a form he had folded into a paper plane. Yet, this man was not supposed to sit in an office, even less than their own leader. Welcome, welcome. I'm glad to finally meet someone from Minas March. You must be Lord Mike, your cat ears give it away. Then this has to be Lydia, your consort. Adam jumped off the chair as if he had just been waiting for a chance to get away from it. Yes, hello. You must be Adam then. Mike said hesitantly as Adam vigorously shook their hands. Exactly. I'm Adam, the governor of Beta sent from Muir, but I'm actually a native, he explained. How did you become their governor, when you originally were from Beta? Lydia asked. They knew a little about Adam and the other through his envoys, just enough to make them curious. That was why Lydia took the chance to ask right away. Ah, that's a long story, Adam said, surprised by the sudden question. Maybe I could tell you a little of it later on. For now, I would like to talk about the reason I asked for this meeting, he changed the subject. Oh, sure, Lydia smiled apologetically. Of course, he would have some business if he asked for a meeting right after their arrival. So, what is the reason? Mike prompted him to continue. He already had a guess. You most likely met some of the new creatures among the beasts of the dungeons and those that came from other worlds through Pathworks, right? Our guess is, that they are the creatures spawned by the awakening of the slumbering realm, as the world messages mentioned. As you can guess, they are quite the problem. As native creatures they seem to spawn at random during the awakening and we have no definite measures to stop them. We managed to deal with most of them, except one. It's a Leave 156 chimera called the questing beast that built its nest in one of the water treatment facilities and keeps poisoning our water supply. The creature has the head of a snake, the body of a leopard, the tail of a lion, and the legs of a deer, and stinks ungodly. I fought it several times, but it can only truly be harmed through divine powers. Personally, I lack the blessing of a god, neither am I a chosen or a saint. We were able to deal damage to it thanks to the blessing from the few priests we have, but we could give it any fatal wounds. Minas Mar has a few chosen ones and I wanted to ask whether you could send one to help us slay the beast, he explained their situation and his request. What is that beast even you can't kill? Mike asked curiously. They did not know a lot about Adam, but one thing that was beyond doubt was his strength. It was not just about attributes and skills, but having stepped onto the path to legend themselves, they could estimate that Adam was even a little ahead of them. Its hide is incredibly resistant to normal attacks and a holy attribute allows to bypass this defense. Even then, I was unable to deal fatal damage in my strongest beast shape. Another factor is its poison breath, which kept forcing us to retreat because of a lack of priests to bless, heal, and detox us during the fight. To make matters worse, it also knows advanced magic of poison, dark, and death attributes. Adam roughly explained the difficulty of the opponent. A chimera beast with the head of a snake, the body of a leopard, the tail of a lion, and the legs of a deer boasting high speed, high defense, strong physical combat, advanced magic, and poison breath. It was understandable that they struggled with it, with a lack of priests or potions and maintaining the surface safety on top of it. Although Adam had approached the two, who were in fact chosen, it didn't seem like he knew about it. Mike, the chosen of Mahis, and Lydia, the chosen of WebNovel, shared a glance. The question was whether they should convey this request to Minas Mar or directly intervene. If they intervened now, would they both step up or just reveal one of them? Although Mike had the skills of Mahis, he still didn't have his special equipment that could synchronize with the divine power. Lydia was the more sensible choice, as she had her divine bow and bat. After a moment of silent conversation, they made the decision not to make one. We will convey your request to the Tower Master and see if he will allow someone to intervene. We will give them a call right away, Mike answered non-committal. They were here but Seth seemed worried during the call, and he told them that they may be in danger, so maybe the blacksmith would rather have someone else come to THRES and intervene in this matter. That's great, thank you, the governor said sincerely. Then I will let you have some privacy so you can make your call, he added and left the room. Slightly puzzled by the man's quick exit, they tried to call Minas Mar again. It had only been an hour since they got the earlier call, but Seth was already not reachable anymore. Instead, they called Mary and she was not against helping, but told them to at least wait for Ceres to arrive. Considering the beast's level and skill set, this was the most sensible option. With the Thunder Parrot's support, there would be nothing to worry about. Alright then, we will inform the governor of this. If Seth changes his mind, call us. They ended the call, and before they could go looking for Adam, the person in question was knocking on their door. Governor. Mike asked when he opened the door. You didn't eavesdrop on our call, did you? He questioned the man's perfect timing to appear the second their call ended. Instead of feeling offended or caught, Adam smiled amused. It seems like your call ended. I just wanted to apologize for interrupting it. No, I did not eavesdrop on you. I came because I got a message that dinner is ready, and I wanted to invite you before going myself, Adam answered in a relaxed manner that didn't seem like he was lying. That would be great. Lydia accepted the invitation. You can tell us your story then. She wasn't going to let that go. We also just wanted to go looking for you. The Tower Master sent us reinforcements earlier. We were asked to wait for them, before assisting you in your task, Mike summed up the answer from Mina's march. It's good to hear that THRES is important enough to the Tower Master that he would send 3 people. I'm sure the third member will not be any weaker than you two. Lydia and Mike shared a glance. Could any of them compete with Ceres? You will be surprised, Lydia assured before she took the lead towards the dinner. Just before realizing that she had no idea where they were going to eat, which ruined her cool exit as she had pointlessly walked down the hallway. I will wait to be surprised, Adam kind of stole her line and took the lead. Chapter 917 Azo, the Pangolion. Delta, Minas Mar. After a moment of communing with Ounce, his demonic lyre possessed by the soul of a great demon bard, Seth decided to give Azo's suggestion a chance. I Will Survive was not necessarily a song fit for engraving. The song showed its best effects when used as a forging ballad or directly sung in battle. In the former case, it could allow an item to repair itself when durability fell below half. The latter could buff, and help allies to recover when they were close to death. However, it could only act as an emergency aid since the power of healing was proportional to the missing health. It used to be my favorite song, so much so I would even sing it during karaoke. But I always lacked the talent to become a bard myself. Azo swooned, remembering her favorite song. If she wasn't a demon, the bard may have expected there to be a deeper meaning behind her loving this song. Do you like it enough to have it etched on your soul? Seth asked her with a smirk. As a matter of fact, the soul enchantment was not as important as usual to the blacksmith, since adding the soul was mostly to power the master tier enchantments on the shield. This was why he was ready to experiment a little. Azo was an ego soul, with a voice skill, and she liked the song itself. Experience told him that there might be an interesting synergy hidden somewhere in there. Etch on my soul? That is what you are going to do? He could hear her excitement. After signing the soul contract, she had accepted her subordination and acted now quite open with him. Do it. Finally, I can connect to this song on an even deeper level. The demoness answered enthusiastically. That's the spirit. The blacksmith spoke out loud and started forging Azo's soul into the spectral mirror image of the mountain borer scale shield. It was when he wanted to start etching that he found that his acid well was empty. Only then did the blacksmith remember that he had emptied it when he finished the fangs of Apep. Give me a moment. He told the soul and left the workshop with quick steps. Although it had started because of a slight curiosity, now Seth wanted to etch this song onto the soul and wouldn't settle for anything less. As such, his quick steps led him out of the workshop, where he stopped when he realized what he was doing. Tower, to the alchemy labs. Using the wizard tower's teleport technology, he instantly appeared at the doors of the alchemy laboratories, where Allison, Evie, and the other alchemists that joined them were working. Allison, did you already finish the new batch of soul acid for me? He barged into her office behind the lab, where instantly stopped, rooted to the ground. Standing face to face with a half-naked Allison and an almost completely undressed Nico Booz, Seth was locked in an awkward silence as the two parties stared at each other. She was unmistakably telling Seth with her stare to screw of, however, the blacksmith pretended not to get the hint. He wanted the acid, he wasn't going to leave without it. It was a contest of will, and the blacksmith finally won. Finally, Allison lifted one of her arms, while covering herself with the other. It's in the cabinet over there, she said, her voice full of restrained emotions. Taking a deep breath and throwing another glance, Seth stepped to the cabinet where he quickly found the vial with acid. Cool, thanks A&D. We will not talk about this, but go to your room to do that. Someone could barge in and catch you too. Leaving behind these wise words, Seth quickly fled the room, leaving an Allison bursting with anger behind. 3 steps out of the lab, Seth called upon the power of teleportation and reappeared in front of his workshop. Safe from Allison and her lust-fueled rage. Tower, Allison is blocked for the rest of the day from using the teleport function to get close to the workshops. He gave a restriction, just to be sure. With a new pot of acid, Seth could finally return to the task at hand. There had really been enough interruptions in the making of this single shield. It was time to finish this once and for all. Energetically, Seth started etching the song onto the spectral shield while acting as the medium that channeled the demonic power of the song into the runes. He had never used the ballad itself, so the process of etching was a little awkward, as he was a stranger to the demon backing this text. What he could feel from the energy flowing through him was unlike what he got from most demonic ballads. The essence was quite positive. Like the song text, it felt like righteous anger, but also hope, resistance, and love. A combination that did not fit the image of demons, but Seth knew that there were many demon gods, and there were some that were not that bad in nature. Although he had never heard of the demon Goryeo Nagar, it seemed to count to the better ones. I can feel it. This power. Yes. Azo exclaimed before falling into a murmur of unintelligible moans and finally stopping. Seth was glad the demon had stopped telling him, as he felt very awkward, having a foreign voice moaning in his mind. The next steps were already routine for the blacksmith. Inserting the soul into the shield, and baptizing it in the water of stis happened almost automatically. Ding! You have created a legendary item. Ding! A synergy between powers has changed your item. Ding! A synergy between materials has changed your item. The familiar announcements rang in his head as the shield with the soul were fused to become a completely new item. Azo, the Pangolian Shield. Legendary. Physical.def 2500. Mag.def, 2000. Durability, 3200. 1 ground defense. 2 trait, Predator's Rule. 3 plus 35% Earth Affinity. 4 Azo's Combat. 5 plus 125 Strength. 6 plus 125 Endurance. 7 Toggle Effect, Hymn of the Survivor. 8 Active Skill, Earth Escape. 9 Active Skill, Earth Shackle. A reforged and improved legendary shield, fashioned from the scale of a mountain borer. This new refined rendition is the work of Master Smith, the first Master Enchanter and Master Blacksmith of Earth. A mix of mysterious and demonic means have given new life to the formerly plain and broken shield originally created by Master Muck. Requirement, Azo's or Smith's acknowledgement. Seth was inspecting the various effects that had been added to the shield. Most of them were what he expected, others were a welcome surprise. For example, he expected for the Master Tier enchantment to experience an improvement through his various means, enhancing the addition of 100 to 125 points per enchantment. A welcome surprise was that Azo's affinity for combat had directly turned into an effect that could improve the wearer's combat awareness and skills by several levels, depending on the skill's affinity with Azo's fighting style. Another was the skill Earth Shackle, which was a snare with the wearer at the center in a radius of 10 meters. Most likely this was the effect of Azo's affinity for earth elemental skills and the scale's disposition. The most interesting one, the one he had been looking forward to, was the effect of I Will Survive, which had fused with Azo's Lion Roar skill. The blacksmith actually had to chuckle when he read the effect of this option, which counted neither as a skill, nor as a normal effect, but a toggle effect. Toggle effect, Hymn of the Survivor. When the wearer is close to death, he can activate the Hymn of the Survivor. Azo will proceed to sing the Hymn of the Survivor. Effect 1, constantly recover the wearer's and his allies' health up to 50% as long as the music is playing. The song plays until the effect is stopped, or Azo has no more mana. Effect 2, while the music is playing, opponents may lose focus as aggro is reduced. This could greatly enhance not just the wearer's survivability, but even that of their party, as it could affect anyone who heard it. This was a truly great power for a tank to wield, although they would have to see how good it would really be in the field. There was just one thing that Seth couldn't come to like. The name. This time he really was a little satisfied with the name, as Pangolian Shield sounded a little stupid for anyone who knew that it was a mix of the words pangolin and lion. In light of the new effect that had been created, which technically allowed the shield to literally sing, Seth decided to change the name of the shield to Azo, Caroling of the Mountain King, since it was a singing shield, with a lion, the king of beasts, demon's soul, and made of a mountain borer's scale. At this moment, he finally put down the shield, really glad that he was finally able to finish this shield. All it took was making an enemy of a demon king and, maybe even more dangerous, disrupting Allison during the deed. He felt like this item had come at a much higher cost than many of his previous legendary items. Seth hoped Beemant would know to appreciate his new shield. If he didn't, the blacksmith would have to teach him a lesson. Chapter 918 Taylor's Request. Seth was glad he finished in time. Tomorrow, Beemant and Jonah's team would return and he could deliver the shield. Not really wanting to immediately keep working, he took a moment to sit down and sort his loot. After all, he had not picked a fight with a demon king for the sake of a single soul. Not only had he harvested the other 3 leading figures of Bragmummel's faction in Delta, netting him 2 fire and 1 wind demon soul, but he had also ripped off Tunomol. Ripped off was a strong word. He had only taken half of his best souls at 50% discounts. In his books, this was very merciful. And he allowed the demon to live in their embassy rent-free. These were 5 high-quality souls ranging between epic and rare, namely: Soul of the Glacial Treant, big, epic. Soul of the Dire Leopard, massive, rare. Soul of the Crowned Blaze Cat, big, rare, ego. Soul of the Dumlin, medium, epic. Soul of the Crystal Vine, massive, epic. He had chosen these 5 from among the few souls Tunomol used to keep on his special floor. They would come in handy in the future when he was going to advertise his skill a little more publicly. Apart from the souls, there were also the 4 bodies of the demon followers like Azos. Aside from the muscular lioness, the other 3 were a wind demon's handsome and rather human body, the body of something that resembled a black goblin but was called a Nightstiltkin, and the body of a flame demon, which looked that black hardened magma without the fire of its soul burning it in. What Seth realized by the 4th demon he had taken along was that these bodies were actually not that good. They were barely on the same level as the corpse of a Leave 90 monster. This just showed that the demons that came through summoning to Earth, drew most of their power from their soul, not their physical embodiment. He was playing with the thought of resurrecting them using different souls and maybe sending them back as spies. However, he quickly threw out this thought. Since he wasn't going to use the original souls, they would have the knowledge to play spy. Not to mention that a higher demon would probably be able to see the difference, even if he used their original souls. Maybe they would look good as servants in the embassy. Having something more human like the lioness and the wind demon serve as guards or maids might be more comfortable in their administrative division under Mary. As for their souls, Seth already had a use for the wind demon's soul, which was the staff he was planning to make using the orb Lixus had brought back. Although the orb could be used on its own, a staff had more possible applications. As he was looking through the loot of the past 2 days, someone opened the door to the workshop and stepped in. It was their freshly baked taller master Nico Booz, who had evidently finished his earlier tryst with Allison. "Look, if you want to talk about earlier, don't." "I know nothing and I saw nothing," Seth said seriously, as he put away the souls and bodies. "Ah. No. I was not here to talk about that," he said a little embarrassedly. "Oh? What else would bring you to my workshop?" Seth asked, puzzled, finally turning around to look at the tailor. "I came to ask for your help," he said, looking him seriously in the eyes. "I don't know what you take me for, but I can't help you with Allison. Even if Mina and Finn agreed, I'm not into stuff with more than one guy, aka myself," Seth quickly announced his boundaries. "Not that. Not with Allison. Sorry, even if you have some side business, I don't think I can help you with that either. But I might tell Allison if you don't stop it. I have no one besides Allison. Can you stop thinking about sex for a minute? I need your help as a blacksmith," he finally exclaimed indignantly. "Ooh, that makes more sense. Why didn't you say so from the start?" At this point, the tailor's head had taken on a fiery red, but the tailor managed to actually swallow his frustration after seconds of wavering between attacking the tower master and running away. He finally managed to speak up in a relatively normal tone. "I need your help for the robe I'm currently making for Lady Lixus." "So Lixus is your side business, you bastard." "I'm not cheating on Allison." Nico exploded. "Who's talking about Allison? You are cheating on me. Did you already finish my sky robe, hey?" Seth exclaimed theatrically. The tailor's eyes were bulging, like they would jump out any moment. "I'm trying to be serious here," Nico finally broke and deflated dejectedly. "I see that. That's why I'm teasing you," Seth answered with a calm smile. "Okay, so you need my help with the new robe for Lixus, what do you need me for?" he continued. Nico looked up hopefully, finally having the chance to explain. "I need your help to create a new kind of thread. Because of the forced leveling, I was recently able to advance my class and unlock new skills. Thanks to working with Master Puffles and his Sky Silk, I made great improvements to these skills as a spell weaver. You know how spell weaver enables me to weave threads from magic spells I learned, right? With the addition of the skills as the tailor of Ivice, I believe I could be able to pull a thread from magic elements, he quickly explained, using the time when Seth was listening in silence. I see, so you could technically create threads from nothing, the blacksmith commented. That's the problem. It's not nothing. I need an extreme concentration of pure magic elements to be able to do it. That is why I came to ask you for help. I know you have the ability to control fire. If you can create an environment for me with extremely dense fire elemental magic, or already create something like a thin thread for me, I believe I could stabilize it into a usable crafting material. I see, what an interesting idea, Seth mumbled. You mean like this? The blacksmith lifted his finger and a thin string of bright orange fire snaked out from the tip, growing longer and longer, as Seth used his mental power to maintain its shape. Yes, yes, just like this, the tailor exclaimed excited after he stared at the thread for a moment. Can I? Sure, but be careful when touching my little snake, Seth teased. Nico's expression derailed for a moment, but he quickly ignored the tower master. Concentrating on the string of fire, he started moving his hand in the air around it, as if he was silently charming the flame serpent. As his hand whirled around the fire, he moved along the strong. Where his hands passed, the blazing orange fire was compressed and stabilized in the shape of yarn. It's working! Nico cried out with joy. Seth only nodded as he watched silently. What he noticed was that, although he could still control the stabilized yarn, he didn't need to spend any mental power on supporting its shape. The best example he came up with, was that it was now closer to using telekinesis on the string, instead of pyromancy. Another thing he noticed was the stabilized part felt a lot tamer and didn't seem to radiate as much heat anymore. The blacksmith and tailor kept going for a while until a little heap of yarn was created on the ground. It was glowing in a neon orange, like a glow stick. Seth couldn't help but look at it with the eyes of the maestro. His eyebrows jumped up in slight surprise. Flame yarn, crafting material. Rare. A rough prototype of yarn spun from pure fire by the hand of Master Booze, with the help of Master Smith. The advanced and exotic skills that work together in the creation are yet to be polished. Properties: high fire affinity, but might hurt the user if used in equipment. Their little experiment had actually led to the creation of a rare rated thread, although it was still a little flawed, as it still radiated an intense heat that could hurt the wearer. What really surprised him was that it was rare, despite Seth only using the most normal of flames. Would the rating rise if he used the Salamander, Draconic Titan, Spirit Flames, or the Flames of Phlegathon? Would the tailor even be able to handle them at this point? Should I use a stronger flame? Seth asked to check, but when he looked up, the question answered itself. Nico Booze looked like an undead. This process had cost him a lot and he looked completely emaciated and tired. His clothes were drenched in sweat and his breathing was heavy. I guess we should postpone the next try for another day. The tailor nodded silently, with a hint of gratefulness on his tired face. He touched the heap of string on the ground, and it automatically rolled up into a blazing yarn ball. Although he was a tailor, Nico had also gained a fair resistance to fire and light as the tailor of Ivice, which was why he could touch the yarn without hurting himself. Seth estimated the ball of yarn would be no different from fireball magic if thrown at a normal adventurer below level 50. Alright then, let's end this here. Go and rest. I will do the same. Although it was not that late, and he was not really tired, Seth used every chance to get back to the girls, when he could. Chapter 919 News from the Holy Land. Catch, the tower master called out and the buff man he called out to, caught a brown shield aiming for his head. Beamont and the rest of Jonah's team had just returned from the abyss, where they had been busy helping the rest of their members and some others, like Seth's other vassal the ONI general, to reach level 100. This was why he wanted to hurry, so it would be ready when the team got back. The front of the smooth shield had a complicated pattern of foreign runes. Beamont couldn't read them, but they were in a pattern that looked like the face of a lion. Seth had etched them like this into Azo's soul and the etchings had somehow surfaced like tattoos on the final shield. Seth didn't quite know how that happened, but his guess had to do with Allison's alchemy skill improving. It was most likely the effect of a better acid which led to the power in the soul to bleed through a little. It was only visual and didn't add any effects, unfortunately. Is this for me? Beamont asked as he stared at the shield in his hands. You have been waiting long enough for your own legendary item. I hope you get along with Ezo. I'm sure we can get along. I like buff guys. Ezo exclaimed telepathically. What was that voice? The veteran adventurer asked a little shocked. Your new shield. It's an ego item. Her name is Ezo. Beeman's eyes widened as he looked at the shield in his hands in wonder. They were shining like those of a little boy who just got the toy he had been wishing for a whole year, or maybe a whole life. Nice to meet you, Ezo, I hope we will be getting along from now on. Yes, let's do that. The demoness said, seemingly satisfied with her new partner. Jonah, it's good that you are back. How is it? Seth asked the vampiric swordsman once he separated from his woman, the researcher they had picked up in beta. The beautiful mask looked his way as Jonah turned around. Seth, it's been a while, he greeted the tower master reserved. He was still a little peeved about the way he had stabbed Jonah in the back by giving him such a delicate mask. It was barely better than outright showing his face and completely didn't fit the image the once very manly man wished for. One could argue that the blacksmith had gotten quite far with his social competence, especially since he inherited the skills of a bard. He actually managed to get the hint and could only speak with a wry smile. Come on, you can't deny that it works a lot better than the old one and fits perfectly well with your skills and power as a chosen one. Seth's argument was only met by a harumph from Jonah, who couldn't deny it, even though he didn't like it. So, how was it in the Holy Land? Seth asked the team leader. The blacksmith had not been back since their expedition to the Abyss, but he had heard the news that the place was becoming more and more crowded with people. The Adventurer Guild was busy constructing their own base, closer to the center of the canyon, and were giving out quests like crazy. The massive lightning bolt-shaped canyon had truly become the Holy Land for adventurers, since the quests did not just pay well, but also allowed them to level as much as they liked. For a people who had been partly denied going to the dungeons and increasing their strength, the current situation was like offering a lake to a man dying of thirst and even paying him for it. Okay, it was not that dire, but many people quickly jumped at the chance, crowding to the Holy Land. There were not as many people, as there were during the rush to reclaim the No Man's Land, which resulted in the area of the unclaimed mountains, but a good number of people were already seeking residency in the yet-to-be-finished city of the Adventurer Guild. Though nobody really dares to make trouble at Minaspalin, it's actually quite rowdy at the place of the Adventurer Guild. There are a bunch of new organizations and religions trying to gather power and profit from the lack of supervision by the guild. Some act no better than bandits, Jonah stated with a sigh. Let's talk about it over a meal later, the tower master suggested. All of them were obviously tired and Seth didn't want to force them to go eat with him in this state. Everyone nodded and agreed, before scuttling away to their rooms. Later on, during the meal, Jonah went into more detail about what was going on in the growing dungeon city. First of all, it was more like a tent settlement, since the Adventurer Guild had been focused on staking off their claim, building walls and setting up a city barrier before even building a city. The only facilities currently finished were a branch of the Adventurer Guild, a few dorms for their members, and, of course, a branch of the System Church, which had also already found a way to place its foot in the door. From what Seth remembered, Mary was also in talks with the guild, to set up a building for them to house a shop and places for their members to stay. Then they could choose between staying and teleporting in from Minaspalin to the dungeon city every morning. Anyway, this was why the inside of the finished city walls was filled with tents from the various adventurers that had flocked to the Holy Land. In this tent city public order was barely enforced and there were various factions vying for power. To Seth's surprise, the Gamma Resistance was the biggest faction currently recruiting. They were the organization founded by two chosen formerly from Gamma, who wished to gather forces and rescue their fellow people, still stuck under the rule of the undead. They were the same people behind the protests against the ambassadors from Arjit Noor. It seemed like they were quite skilled in accumulating and training members in the Holy Land, being even more numerous than the various churches that had popped up during the Berserker Pellet incidents. Apart from the religious followers, there were quite a few private guilds, founded around freshly chosen champions and backed by rich people. Although the credits of Earth had quickly lost their meaning, in the face of the system gold and its various uses, but one should not underestimate the rich. They always had their way to stay in power, one way or the other. Despite suffering a lot of damage, there were many that had thrived in these troubled times using the head start their original wealth gave them, to collect new riches. Even the current climate in Delta couldn't harm them too much. Their only setback was the initial expedition to the Holy Land, where the guilds of Delta lost most of their people. Afterward, they had to reform and took the Boulder Guild as an example to center their guild around chosen ones. This loss was the only reason. They were still a smaller faction than the various religions. Neither of these groups was averse to using force to get what they wanted or force people to join them. With their own goals and obsessions, every one of them turned the place into a dog-eat-dog world. But you didn't face any problems, right? Seth asked, hearing how chaotic the place had become. From Jonah's description, he could imagine the struggle people would face to survive and thrive in that place. If the city was already like this, he couldn't imagine that the land outside, fraught with monsters and dangers, would be any better. It was probably worse. We came across some bandits, but they quickly lost their heads, the swordsman said, not as a figure of speech. They had shown no mercy to such people. They could only blame themselves for being unable to assess their victim's power. It was nothing big. I see, Seth mumbled, nodding. Currently, the dungeon city seemed almost like a meat grinder, a place sometimes described in novels. Not a good place, but one of danger, tragedy, but also opportunity. It was not his place to interfere, so he could only hope it would improve as the Adventurer Guild proceeded to build the city. Oh, yeah. Now that we talked about it, we were approached by a messenger from the Gamma Resistance. They gave me a letter for you. After saying so, Jonah pulled a small envelope from his inventory and handed it to Seth, who took it slightly puzzled. What would those guys want from him? With this question in mind, he checked the letter with Aya's discerning eyes to make sure it was safe, before opening and reading it. Chapter 920 Contents of the letter. Seth's eyes widened in welcome surprise as he read the contents of the letter. He had already expected it to be political. The Gamma Resistance was a group that intended to go against Arjit Noor, while Minas Mar was currently in the talks to remain at least neutral. The Bard had expected some idealistic gibberish, similar to what the hero Ben Harker used to spout. Unexpectedly, it was not idealistic or political in nature, but a simple business request. The sender was Galwel Roparts, the leader of the Gamma Resistance, a warrior who had become a chosen a few weeks after the first wave of elections. Chosen by a god called Tyr from the Asgardian pantheon. As his chosen, he gained great power as a commander and leader of a group or army, explaining how the Gamma Resistance was able to grow so quickly without the backing of a major force. The reason for the letter was actually a quite fortunate one, for Seth. Like Mike, Galwel had gotten a quest from his god to find a specific ore in the abyss of the Holy Land. After finding it, it was blessed by his god, and now he needed to find a craftsman who could make a piece of special equipment. Although they had not even started spreading their name in making legendary items, Minas Mar was already the first place on his mind. Seth had not expected his plan, to grow his path by profiting from chosen like Mike and this man, would already come to fruition before he enacted it. This was the power of their good reputation, which was nurtured and maintained mostly by Mary and the decisions of the others in the administration. Of course, his own skills and those of his colleagues also played a role. Originally, Seth would have been idle for a while. Now that the shield was finished and delivered, the only thing left of the legendary materials they brought back from Y City was the Wind Orb now. Once Seth processed it, he intended to spend his time leisurely with Finn and Mina and slowly research the Mad Ithildan and the synergies of materials. Part of his research on synergy would be items for the souls of the demons and the ones he had gotten from Tunomol. He had chosen quality souls with very one-sided properties and wanted to attempt and tailor at least relic-rated sets specifically for these souls. It would have worked out, the plans for the tournament were already settled, and there was no need to do anything more, but this created a new possibility since they would be able to advertise their skill in creating legendary equipment even before the tournament without any cost to himself. Not only could he start farming power of existence, but if he helped the Gamma Resistance like this, it would soothe the queasy feeling in his stomach, when coming to an arrangement with Arjit Noor. After all, it wasn't like he didn't feel anything when hearing that they were using people as slaves. Like actual slaves, not corporate ones. If Seth supplied their leader with a legendary weapon, it was quite clear who they were going to use it against, if things went south. There was nothing wrong for an arms dealer to have a good relationship with both sides. It might even be part of the profession. Thank you, Jonah. I will talk to Mary about this. Before he decided this, he wanted to talk with their PR people and the others, to see if they agreed, too. After all, they would have to deal with most of the aftermath, not him. No, I think that simplifies a lot of things and improves the trust in the grand prize. I am glad you asked me before you accepted this deal. But the time I really wish you had consulted us was when you decided to pick a fight with a demon king, Mary said bitterly. Even if the demons had no clue who killed Bragmummel's subordinates, they had set up Tunomol in their embassy. It was clear that they were backing the sole traitor, so if not for the murder of his people, they would pick a fight for harboring the goat. I'm sorry, Mary, but that was a necessity. I need Tunomol's supply of souls, or else I would have to go out and collect them myself. You wouldn't want me to go out there and do it myself, would you? The blacksmith asked honestly. Mary imagined the consequences of the blacksmith going for a walk, specifically to collect souls. At this point, the products that would be able to make Seth move had to be at least the level of the demons he recently harvested. With that in mind, how many more potential enemies would they have by the time he came back? All right, it's not like I was really blaming you for this. But it would have been nice to let us know in advance. I will keep it in mind if it happens again. Let's hope it doesn't. Afterward, they kept talking about the changes to the preparations of the tournament. They would have to make sure to advertise the items they would be making for the leader of the Gamma Resistance. In this matter, there was also the question of Arjit Noor. Mary had already collected the votes on the matter from their members, the Guardians, and of the elected leaders of the different tree stations. The general consensus was that they were not against it. Some had their concerns, and the current leader of Little Gamma was against it, but overall, the vote was in favor of a non-aggression treaty. This also solved the possible strain in their relationship with Arjit Noor, once they advertised that they made a piece of legendary equipment for their opposition. But since they would also be able to supply them with golems, that would probably calm their tempers a little. He would be fairly supplying both sides with weapons like any upright and self-respecting arms dealer would. On that note, maybe we could try and de-escalate this situation a little bit, Mary suggested. How would we do that? The blacksmith asked. Did the scribe have an idea of how to bring peace to the lands? Could we just make it a condition of the non-aggression treaty that they have to release the Orihuma slaves they caught on Earth? At least those who wish to leave. We could offer them a discount on the golems in exchange. A small one, Mary suggested. Do you really think the undead would agree to give up their slaves? Seth asked doubtfully. Personally, he had not put much thought into the treaty, yet. As such, the idea of adding a condition had no been present in his mind. Even if they don't agree, it won't hurt to try, right? She was right. Suggesting the condition was worth the try. If they succeeded, it would be even better. If not, it didn't matter. Some people may think that bringing peace is not the job of an arms dealer and it would hurt their business. However, peace was just the silence before the next war, as they said. Arjit Noor was not afraid of the Gamma Resistance, they were preparing for Spacia. Sowing peace here would just improve his reputation for later deals. But what do we do with all the people? Seth asked, a little worried. Just freeing them wouldn't be enough, they also had to make sure they had a place to go to. Seth had experienced too many refugee situations to forget this point. Did you already forget about the starter village at the edge of Gamma? I set it up during the first wave of refugees from Gamma, on the way back from rescuing you. Attempted rescue, I managed to flee myself. On that note, why are they still people in Gamma, when Krana's condition back then was to let all the natives go? The blacksmith asked, suddenly remembering this detail. The districts of Earth are big and the people of Gamma had already gotten used to hiding and distrust because of the Zarkists. I never expected everyone to trust us and come along to Delta. The people who stayed, either because they were afraid, or wanted to fight for their home, it should be those people, Lena stated her opinion. Anyway, we can use the Starta Village's system Church and Minas Palin to teleport them to Delta, and if they wish, they could then still try to migrate to Minas March. I know the new representative in Delta. I'm sure they would be happy if some more people decided to stay in Delta, the district has been rather empty lately. Alright, at least we have a rough plan, in case Arjit Noor accepts our conditions, Seth completed their conversation. They would agree to meet Galwell, the leader of Gamma Resistance, and approach Arjit Noor for the non-aggression treaty.